Hi, my name is Kristen. This is Kristen Craves Books, and let's talk about some wintry reads. So once again, Becky from Bex Reads asked me if I wanted to collab with her and a few fellow booktubers, and I was thrilled to do it. We did a witchy book recommendation video last time. I will leave a link to that video down below. We had so much fun doing that. And this time we are going to share books with cold settings, wintry vibes, those kind of things. And I want to make sure that I shout out all the other channels who are posting today, so you can see all their videos, get all your recommendations for December, January, February. In my mind, January is really when I really lean into wintry reads, because a lot of my December reading is festive, which can be wintry, but I think we're looking for different things here. So, of course, we have Becky from Bex Reads, who put this all together, Jackie from First Lady Reads, Jack from Jack in the Book Stack, Millie from Into the Nook, and then myself, of course. So check out all those videos. We're gonna get a lot of recommendations, my poor TBR, but I am ready for it, because when I was going through this, I realized I don't have as many as I thought that I did. So I'm gonna talk about the ones I read and recommend or think that you might enjoy. There are a couple that weren't my favorites, but those are personal reasons and they're beloved. I just still want to put them on your radar. And then some that are on my TBR as well. So let's dive right into it. I'm going to start with the books that I physically own, and we're just going to get this one out of the way, because if you Google Wintery Reads Books with Cold Settings, this book comes up, and it's for a good reason, one of my all-time favorite books. So it would just be remiss. I can't not include it on a list like this, and that is The Bear and the Nightingale by Katherine Arden. Katherine Arden is one of my favorite authors. This is one of my favorite books. I need to continue on with the series. This is called the Winter Night Trilogy, so again, it's just perfect recommendation for this. You can see from the vibes of the cover that this is wintry. This is like a Russian folktale kind of story, and the main character is one of my favorites, but the setting in here is what really makes this stand out, because they are kind of in an isolated community. This is a fantasy, but I would think that this book is more of a setup. So we're really getting a lot about her family. Her mother dies at the beginning of the book. Her father brings home a new wife, and her new wife is very religious and is against a lot of the stuff that our main character experiences. She can see like ghosts and things and talk to these spirits, and it's really about living in this community where it is snowing all the time, it is freezing cold, trying to survive. There's a lot of survival stuff, and then this magical element that comes into play, and I think will probably be built on in the second and third book. Determined to finish this trilogy because I love this book so much, but it's the ultimate wintry read recommendation. You ask anybody who's read this, this is the first book that comes to mind when you think of a prompt like this, but I had to mention it. So if you haven't read this yet, please check it out. It's fantastic. This next book is one I don't talk about enough, because I actually read this before I was part of the online book community in any capacity, before on my blog, my Bookstagram, my BookTube channel, but I still think of it as a favorite, and I'm so happy that I have a chance to highlight it here, and that is Burial Rites by Hannah Kent. This is historical fiction, and if you don't think of yourself as a historical fiction reader, I still think you will like this. There's something about this that just stays with you, and I think everybody can appreciate, especially because this is based on the story of a real woman. So what's happening here is historical fiction, so this isn't a time where executions are still happening in northern Iceland at this time, and this is the first woman who faces execution. And what happens is as she's waiting her death, she is placed with a family who has to kind of take care of her and keep an eye on her and imprison her, really. And of course the family is against this, but as they learn more about her story, she did kill her husband, they get her side, because it's been very sensationalized, the story, but the more they get to know this character, realize her story, the more they feel for her, and it's just like such a bittersweet, sad story that'll have a lasting impact on you. And the fact that it is set in Iceland, that's a big part of this, and the isolation, of course, that's really what I look for in a book like this, a book set in winter or in the cold. You want that isolation. You want to feel like these characters are trapped, they're freezing, there is a survival. This is another mouth for this family to feed as well, so that all comes into play. This is just such a great book, and I have another book by this author I really need to read, because I forget how much I love this one and highly recommend it. I know that there are a lot of thrillers, mysteries that are set in cold settings, but I haven't read a ton of them. I do have a couple of my TBR, but one that I do recommend, this is the second book in the Inspector Gamache series by Louise Penny. This is a very popular series. The first book is Still Life, and This is almost like a cozy mystery, just I would say like a bit more graphic than that, and it does do a little bit, it doesn't fall into all the tropes of cozy mysteries, but I still think it's a cozy book. And if you like mysteries, you like following a detective, I recommend this series quite a bit. This is a Canadian author. It is set in a fictional town in Quebec called Three Pines, and actually this is being adapted. I'm going to link the trailer down below because we're getting an adaptation of this soon, so that was a good time to start. The series is very long. I am nowhere close to being caught up with this, but because it is set in Quebec in Canada, a lot of the books are snowy. It's just the nature of it. The first one is a little bit, but this one, the second installment, very much so. And I do think you can read these out of order, but I would read them in order. This is only the second book if you want to get to it, as you can see from the snow on the cover. The murder in here is interesting. A dead body is found in the middle of a frozen lake during the town's curling match, which just screams winter, and the body is in the middle of the lake and has been electrocuted, and we kind of find out how that happens. And it's a very interesting story. I really like Louise Penny's writing. It's a really easy to dive into this series, fall in love with these characters in Three Pines. They aren't always the nicest to each other, so you get that dynamic as well. And I do think the mysteries are well done and surprising. So if you're looking for something like that to cozy up with this winter, I think this is a great series to do that with, especially this book. And the last one that I read that I physically own is actually middle grade, and I think there's something about winter settings in middle grade that just works, and it's really magical. And I'm not the biggest middle grade reader, but I do find myself drawn to them if they are in cold settings or wintry, and just this time of year in general, because you kind of want that cozy vibe, something you can sit down in front of a fireplace or under a warm blanket with a hot chocolate and just get through a book in one sitting. And that is what I did last year with A Boy Called Christmas by Matt Haig. And you can't see it in this shot, but I pulled out all my Christmassy books, and I have every book in the series. I marathoned them all in I think in a weekend last year, and it was so wonderful. And Matt Haig is obviously a very popular author. This is his middle grade series. This is actually a really sweet movie. I really like the adaptation as well, and it's obviously this boy named Christmas. It's about him finding out his history. He's set in the snow. It's very isolated. Then he comes to this town of elves, and snow's really important to this as well. He kind of gets lost in the snow, so you get all of those kind of tropes and scenes as well. But it's just so magically beautiful, and if you do have kids, I think they would love this. I think you could read the series to them, then watch the movie, and it just brings you so much joy. So if you're looking for something a little bit more cozy to read that has a wintry setting, I recommend this. And I have 2 middle grades on my TBR, so we'll come up to those soon. So I want to read a few more wintry books for this video, and I did manage to do that, and I asked my friends in our book checkout Discord for any recommendations, and I got a lot of great recommendations, but everybody said Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik, and it is known that I just hated Uprooted. I was not a fan of Uprooted at all, but that really comes down to the Beauty and the Beast retelling thing that I struggle with. I did think Naomi Novik's writing was beautiful, but I've been putting off Spinning Silver because I've been nervous. And then I see a lot of people who agree with me on Uprooted, absolutely adore Spinning Silver, so I went for it. I listened to this on audiobook over the last week. I finished it yesterday. Loved it. It's in my top 10 books of the year. I don't know why I put this off. Well, I do. I just told you the reasons, but I shouldn't have, because it's beautiful. The writing's fantastic. It gives me the same feelings that The Bear the Nightingale did, so if you're looking for that vibe, please read Spinning Silver. It's such a hard thing to talk about, to like explain to you unless you've read them. There's just an atmosphere, a vibe in them that works, and this is like a loose retelling, but not really. And we're following 3 different female characters who all kind of interconnect, and they're all facing adversity. They all kind of have different relationships with their fathers, complicated relationships with their fathers, I would say, and they're just trying to survive, and it's really isolated as well. It's perpetually winter in this land, and we get some really, really good snowy scenes in here, and the writing is just next level, and I just loved everything about these characters. It's obviously fantasy. There's like a fantasy element to it because one of our characters can turn silver into gold, but it's just beautiful. I just love this. I am blown away by this, and I did want to shout out that tomorrow, I'm filming this a few days early, but when I post this, tomorrow, December 4th, there is a live show at 2 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. So I will link this down below on Kay's Hidden Shelf channel. And I think Maria might read that, and Hannah Blackwell will be doing that as well. So I'm gonna be there because I'm so happy that I managed to read this before that so I can join in the comments. So if you have read this, check out that live show. I will be in the comments. So yeah, so thrilled that I read that for this video and that I loved it. So thanks to Becky for putting this together, because I don't know that I ever would have prioritized that otherwise, and I really, really just adored it. And then there were a couple others that I listened to for this video that I want to recommend and I thought were fun. The first one is Whiteout, and this is like a follow-up to Blackout that was really popular last year and I really enjoyed. So there are different authors in this. We have Daniela Clayton, Tiffany D. Jackson, Nick Stone, Angie Thomas, Ashley Woodfolk, and Nicola Yoon. And if you know me, you know that Tiffany D. Jackson is like an autobiography author for me, so of course I had to listen to this. And if you read Blackout, you know that it is a series of like interconnected short stories that all come together. And I thought that's what Whiteout would be, but it's not. So you don't get different short stories from each of these authors. You have no idea what each of the authors wrote. So that was a bit jarring for me going in, but it reads more like a full novel, just with different POVs, and different authors wrote different perspectives, and they kind of hint, they give you like a riddle at the end of who wrote what, but I don't know the authors well enough to deduce that, so if you did, let me know. But this takes place in Atlanta during a blizzard, and obviously in Atlanta this is very rare. They weren't prepared for this, so we follow all of the characters, their different like romantic relationships, their different struggles that are formed during this blizzard. I think it's around Thanksgiving or Christmas, so it's the perfect time to be reading that, and it's really fun to just read about how being trapped brought all these characters together, and we open up about their struggles. There's like friends to lovers happening in here. There's like kind of enemies to lovers. There's a story of forgiveness, and that's really what this is all based around. All these characters are loosely friends or know each other, and they're helping to bring this couple back together, and it's really sweet. It's not as good as Blackout, I would say, but it's still worth listening to or reading. It's a quick one, it's really snowy, and it's just a good time. So I had fun with that one, I will say. Up next we have Moon on the Crusted Snow by Weshi McRice, and this is one that you'll find on a lot of lists like this. It's recommended all the time, but I think that's for good reason, and I'm glad that I finally listened to this and made time for it, and it's a quick audiobook, so I highly recommend. And this is like a dystopian, a post-apocalyptic novel that really feels all too real, like it could happen, and this is following an Anishinaabe community in northern Canada, and they're a very isolated, close-knit community, and one morning they wake up and the power's out, and they think, okay, there's a power outage, that's not too scary or uncommon, we have supplies, we're prepared for this, and then the power never really comes back, and they start to wonder what's happening, but they don't have communication with any other communities, or Southern Ontario, no connection with Toronto or anything like that. But then two members of the community who are university students come back home, and they say everything is falling apart in the other parts of the world. We don't really get many answers as to exactly what's happening, but it's chaos. So they think, okay, we're equipped for this, it's scary, but we can do this. Then people who are not members of the community start showing up and looking for safety, but of course that's a scary thing. These people don't always have their best intentions, especially when survival is at stake. People are really all out for themselves, and we follow Evan. He's really our main character, and his family and what he was willing to do, and it's really just fantastic. I thought this was really well written, and what's fascinating is that we are supposed to get, I followed the author on Twitter, and we are supposed to get the sequel. I wrote down what the sequel's name is. Let me see. Moon of the Turning Leaves. So that's giving me fall vibes. We're supposed to get the sequel next year, which is awesome because this is an older book. I think this is 10 years later. So I read this at the perfect time. And I recommend you checking it out too, because I think it's the only one on my list, even in my TBR list, that is snowy vibes in a dystopian way. And I think that really adds an element of scary and realism to it, and it's just really beautifully written, and you can read it now before the sequel comes out. I also want to put a cozy mystery on this list. There are a ton of wintry cozy mysteries, so many out there, but my favorite is 12 Slaves of Christmas by Jacqueline Frost. I don't think that's her real name. That is just a hilarious pet name for this series. And what is it, The Knife Before Christmas? I forget what the third one is, but I marathoned them all. They were so much fun. The cover obviously gives very festive, wintry vibes. We're following a main character named Holly, of course, who's going through a bad breakup, comes back to her town of Mistletoe, and her family owns like a resort or a lodge of some kind, and every year they put on these reindeer games, and during one of the reindeer games somebody is found dead and her family's being framed for it. She has to find out who really did it. But the town is so snowy, wintry, sweet, Christmassy. It's just so good, and I think if that's more what you're looking for when it comes to snowy settings, that's a perfect series, a really good one to get into cozies, because that is how I got into them and I adored it, and now I'm a cozy mystery stan. So yeah, that is a great series. I think it's called The Christmas Tree Farm Murders or something. Just really good, and I listened to those on audio as well, and the audiobooks are great. Then there were a few non-fictions I could have put on this list, because I did go through a phase where I was really into reading books about hiking and people climbing mountains and survival stories like that. That was a few years ago, and there's some really good ones out there, so I would recommend checking out just that subgenre of nonfiction in general if that's something you're interested in. But I settled on Dead Mountain, and the subtitle is The Untold True Story of the Deletov Pass Incident. And this is a really fascinating story that happened in 1959 Russia. It is these group of like 9 experienced hikers who all end up dead on this pass called the Dead Mountain, and their deaths are very mysterious. We have photos of them, different journals from them that the author has collected and put together and tried to piece what happened here. They kind of had violent injuries. They ran out of the tent without shoes on. So it's like, what really happened to these men? All 9 of them died in very interesting ways, different ways. They don't really know. There's radiation on their clothes. And the author does pose a theory at the end as to what happened to them that I thought was really interesting. So this is a really good, more like literary nonfiction, kind of reads like fiction because the story is so wild, and I highly recommend that. I thought that was really, really good. And of course, just the harshness of snow and weather is really at play in this story, and there's lots of other things going on as well. It's interesting. We are really losing the light here, but that is just the nature of November. It's actually raining, which I think is weird, but we'll soldier on here. And then I have 2 that I didn't love, but I want to recommend because they're so loved, and the reasons I didn't love them are just personal to me. So the first one is No Exit by Taylor Adams, and I think this is the ultimate snowy thriller. If you're going to read one snowy thriller, I think this is probably the one to go with, because we're following a girl who's trying to drive home. The snow is so bad that she has to pull over to like a rest stop, and she ends up isolated there with some strangers, and she goes outside and she finds a young girl in somebody's car who has been kidnapped. So she knows somebody who she's inside with is a kidnapper, and you find out really early on who that is. And that is my problem with this, because I just realized, this is the book that made me realize I don't like knowing who the killer is early on and then just following a character try to escape. That is not my thing, but if that is your thing, this is perfect. It is very suspenseful. There's a lot going on here. You'll be turning the pages. I was actually moved at the ending. It's just not my kind of thriller, but very snowy. Plays a huge role. A really beloved thriller. And there's a movie. I haven't heard great things about the movie, but you know, sometimes bad movies are still fun to watch. And then the other one I didn't love is Echo North by Joanna Ruth Meyer, and this is a me thing as well, because this is polar fantasy. I thought it was really interesting, but I don't like the Beauty and the Beast kind of trope that happened in here. I'll be honest, I don't remember a lot about it other than that it was super snowy. So it says, Echo's safe and carefully structured world falls apart when her father leaves for the city and mysteriously disappears. Believing he's lost forever, Echo is shocked to find him half frozen in the winter forest 6 months later, guarded by a strange talking wolf. And she kind of makes a deal with this wolf, and it all plays from there. So I know that's a really beloved book as well, and I will say the author's writing is fantastic. This is turning into a lot longer video than I intended, so we'll go through my TBR books quickly. Dead in Gondola by Anne Claire. This is a Christie Bookshop mystery, so this is another cozy mystery, and it's set in like a ski resort, and I think somebody gets murdered on a ski lift, so I think that's supposed to be really fun. This is actually a new release. There's a cow on the cover. It's short. Really looking forward to that. I'm saving it for January because I'm going to read some higher fantasy in January, and I know I'm going to need something like this to break it up. The next one that I own, the last one that I own, is The Hunting Party by Lucy Foley. I know this gets mixed reviews, but knowing that going in will probably make me enjoy it more. I just kind of want a popcorn thriller. This follows a group of college friends who get together every year at a hunting lodge for New Year's, and they end up snowed in, of course, and one of them is murdered, and you know that one among them is a killer, and you're trying to deduce who that is. So I'm good with the drama. I want the drama. I'm here for it. Sounds like a good time to me. I didn't mind The Guest List by Lucy Foley, so I might like this. We'll see. I just want it to be a good, quick time. Very snowy. Snowed in. That's what I'm looking for. I love a good snowed in story. Then a few others on my TBR. Beartown by Frederick Bachman, of course. Everybody I feel like has read that. I love Frederick Bachman. This one just seems heavier than I'm ready for, but it does center around hockey. A hockey team, they play out in a frozen lake. That's very important to this hockey team. But then I think a young girl is assaulted by somebody in the hockey team, and that has ramifications throughout the whole community. And I've heard good things about this book. People love it. But also that series is huge. So the last book in the series is massive. If you like big series, if you're into hockey, you like cold settings, I think this could be a good one. If you like Frederick Bachman, that's available. I really do want to get to that eventually. I just have to work myself up for it. And it wouldn't be a recommendations video if I didn't have a T. Kingfisher on the list. She has one called The Raven and the Reindeer, and Kate from Kate Coy really liked this one, so I really want to get to it. And I'm going to read you the synopsis because it's short, and I love all of T. Kingfisher's synopsis. So it says, when Gerda's friend Kay is stolen away by the mysterious Snow Queen, it's up to Gerda to find him. Her journey will take her through a dangerous land of snow and witchcraft, accompanied by a bandit and a talking raven. Can she win her friend's release, or will following her heart take her to unexpected places? So this is like a Snow Queen by Hans Christian Andersen retelling. So I think that's going to be perfect. I just love everything that T. Kingfisher does with her fantasies. And then I have the two middle grades that were recommended to me. So Sarah from Brighton Bookish, they recommended Ophelia and the Marvelous Boy. And this follows, I think, two siblings who end up in some kind of museum where it always snows. It's like snowing inside there. Yeah, their father takes a job in a strange museum in a city where it always snows. On her very first day in the museum, Ophelia discovers a boy locked away in a long-forgotten room. He's a prisoner of Her Majesty, the Snow Queen, and Ophelia tries to help save him. So that sounds cute. And then Cassidy from Covers with Cassidy recommended The Polar Bear Explorers Club by Alex Bell. And this is join Stella Starflake Pearl, which is such a cute name, and her three fellow explorers as they trek across the snowy Icelands and come to face with frost fairies, snow queens, outlaw hideouts, unicorns, dinosaurs, and carnivorous cabbages, which is hilarious. So yeah, I do think middle grade lends itself well to snowy adventure stories, and those both sound adorable, so I'm looking forward to trying those out. So that wraps up this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you found some snowy recommendations to add to your TBR. Leave me recommendations down below because I'm on the look for them. But of course I'm going to watch all my fellow booktubers videos as well. Thanks again for your support. I'll talk to you again soon. Bye for now.